Hey, good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to SIAM's webinar this afternoon, Implementing GIS Standards for BNG Assessments. So today we're going to hear a little bit about practical framework for improving GIS data quality in BNG submissions. If you've got any questions, hopefully we'll get to some at the end. So please put them in the Q&A and we'll pop them to Katie at the end of today's session. The session today, we've allowed an hour, but we may finish a bit before that, depending on questions today. So thank you again for joining us, and I'm going to pass you over to Dr. Katie Dawson, who's a Technical Director of Spatial, a GIS consultancy and S3 partner specialising in environmental data, spatial analysis and BNG. She's got over 10 years of experience in geospatial strategy and project delivery, and she's not only recognised as an advocate for practical accessible mapping solutions, she's recently co-founded the BNG Spatial Insights Group to support sector-wide collaboration. So this afternoon, thank you very much, Katie, for joining us, and I'll pass over to you.
Brilliant. Thank you, Sarah. So I'm Katie, I'm Technical Director at Ecospatial. So I'm going to be talking to you about GIS data standards for Biodiversity Net Gain. I'll go through, because this is SIAM, you don't need too much of an introduction into BNG, a very, very short introduction, kind of the importance of GIS in the space, discuss some of the challenges of not having a standardized approach to data submissions, exploring for a solution, and then our actual solution, and then I'll break down that framework. And I'll finish up, Sarah mentioned, about the BNG Spatial Insights Group with a bit of information about that group in case anybody is interested in joining. So first, a little bit more a background. As Sarah mentioned, we're a GIS consultancy and part of the Esri partner community. We specialize in BNG, GIS data management and support, but also general management as well. So our most notable client has been the Canal and River Trust. We built their ecological data hub. So this is a platform on their Esri system that allows for their departments to explore their BNG baseline data. So this means they can supply information to LPAs, update and validate that baseline, and keep track of their BNG projects across the entire estate. So personally, I've worked in this field since the start of my PhD back in 2014. Which was sponsored by Costain. I spent just less than 10 years with Costain in the GIS team, working to implement solutions that I had developed as part of my thesis, which was around the utilization of GIS for more ecologically aware infrastructure. So although I'm not an ecologist, and I don't pretend to be one or claim to be one, I have actually been in the field for quite a long time and seen the difficulties and inefficiencies in BNG from a GIS support perspective. And I am incredibly passionate about this topic, and I actually post a fortnightly newsletter on the Ecospatial LinkedIn page discussing different insights and issues relating to GIS and BNG. So, for example, themes like digitizing slope, that's digitizing comma slope, not actually digitizing slope, and the removal of aspects like connectivity, and then also things like AI as well. So today's presentation is in a story map format. If you would like access to the story map after the presentation, I am happy to provide it. So BNG in England. So as we know, BNG is calculated using a standardized metric tool. And this tool uses measurable metrics that describe the habitats in numeric multipliers to give us our BNG score. And a critical multiplier of that metric is area. And the accuracy of overall units can really vary based on this measure. And the most effective way of calculating the area of land parcels is using GIS. And this is obviously encouraged by Natural England, and I know a lot of you are incorporating GIS as part of your procedures anyway, and are doing a fantastic job of doing so. However, despite provided GIS data standard from BNG, so this is the QGIS data standard, there isn't actually a standardization for the GIS data submitted to support BNG for planning applications. So in January 2025, I published our white paper addressing GIS data standards in BNG assessments. I reviewed the issues currently faced by local planners and operatives, along with citing some peer-reviewed stats. So, for example, 25% of LPA accepted assessments contain errors regarding the aggregation of habitat areas between the baseline and post-development scenarios. So this specifically relates to the accuracy and consistency of red line boundaries used within BNG assessments. So from our white paper, we got a full understandings of the challenges relating to the lack of data standards. So first of all, submitting incompatible file types can cause delays and errors during processing, and without clear coordinate systems, data may not align with other data sets, so leading to inaccuracies within the calculations. If the red line boundary does not match registry records, it can lead to inaccurate calculations or could lead to potential legal disputes. If the red line boundary used in the baseline is different from the red line boundary used in post-development designs, then hectares of area may be unaccounted for. And polygon boundaries that are not snapped may mean an overlap of polygons or polygon gaps, so relating in unit duplications or unaccounted units, respectively. And these errors do tend to come from manual digitizing. And then skipping verification in habitat classification may result in incorrect habitat types. There are some assessments that can be purposefully or accidentally dishonest when it comes to recording the baseline, and ultimately affects the amount of real world enhancements to biodiversity, and that actually may come short of the 10% target. Missing metadata can reduce trust in usability and removes the capacity for data auditing. And this weakens the credibility of calculations and could be seen potentially as non-compliance with established metadata guidelines, such as GEMINI 2.3. And then missing fields can lead to flawed assessments and non-compliance with the metrics set out by Natural England. So using non-standard data structures can complicate that analysis and integration within systems, and again, weakens the credibility of the assessment. And then finally, we believe that there are some principles that are missing from the BNG policy altogether, that main factor being slope. A 2D vantage point that does not incorporate topography mean that we might actually be underestimating area measurements and ultimately our BNG score. So the depth of a polygon on an incline is smaller in 2D than 3D. Also, kind of branching on this a little bit, there is obviously some ecological consequences to not incorporating slope as well. So there may be habitats that may not be suitable for certain terrain, and this currently isn't restricted in the official reporting tool. So we knew we needed a standardization to inform our solution. The introduction and implementation of GIS standards ultimately improves data quality and the accuracy of results. And GIS data standards and factors of data quality do exist and are recognized across both academic and professional environments. So our standardization is built on data quality foundations in GIS systems, field data collection, and metadata. So those foundations are consistency, so referring to how uniform the data is across data sets over time. And this is essential when comparing or integrating data across projects. Inconsistent field names, formats, or coordinate systems create delays and reduce trust in the data. Linkage is about connecting habitat polygons to wider ecological evidence. A strong data set doesn't sit in isolation. It should be backed by field surveys, imagery, planning layers, and land use data. And when that linkage is missing, it's hard to defend classification decisions or track data lineage through time. Speaking of which, the lineage, this is capturing the who, what, where, and how of the data collection. So knowing when data was gathered, what equipment was used, and who was processing it increases the traceability and confidence in future audits. The positional accuracy determines whether features actually appear where they are in real life, on sloping or steep terrain, or dealing with smaller features. Even a few meters out can affect biodiversity unit scores. And that's why things like consistent red line boundaries and habitat boundary accuracy is so important. And then attribute accuracy is about the values tied to features. So habitat types, condition scores, species presence if collected. These need to be correct, validated, and consistently applied. Otherwise, BNG scores won't actually reflect the ecological reality. And then the logical consistency is about the structure of the data. So no overlaps, no gaps, no broken geometry or missing field names. And this is the backbone of any kind of reliable GIS data set. And then finally, the completeness ensures everything is there. So no missing habitats, no skipped condition scores, no gaps in the attribute table. Because if it's not complete, it is not defendable and it's not auditable. So after reviewing all of these aspects of data quality, it became clear that the issues weren't just occasional errors, they were systematic patterns showing up again and again. And the challenge isn't a lack of technical skill in any way, not from ecologists, GIS practitioners. It is the absence of clear shared structure, something practical, lightweight, and usable. So not just a set of abstract best practices, but a framework that reflects how people work. And that is what has led to the development of FRIDAS. So it is a synthesis of the core pain points that we've seen in the real data turned into a set of practical checks and standards. And it's not about adding more admin, it's about giving GIS consultants, ecologists, developers just a common foundation to work from so that everybody is using data that's defensible, traceable, and genuinely useful across the project lifestyle. And bringing these insights together into one structured approach, FRIDAS gives a way to move from kind of reactive fixes in data to proactive good guidance. And it is a tool for teams that, want to add credibility to their BNG assessments and build spatial data that holds over time. Now, I would like to say FRIDAS comes from the ancient Greek, meaning enlightened data or data connection or something related to nature, but it is much simpler than that. FRIDAS is the acronym for the 6 major categories in our data standard. So each letter represents a category to simplify the data management process, and they are as follows. Our format, so ensuring all data aligns with the required standards for seamless integration. The red line boundary, validating our spatial boundaries to prevent any duplications or omissions. Identification, so ensuring accurate habitat classification, avoiding gaps or overlays in our polygons. Data, metadata, ensuring detailed data for transparency and traceability. Attributes, so verifying that key ecological details are consistently and correctly represented, and then slope, incorporating that data to enhance that ecological relevance. So each category has between 1 and 3 question items for the user to answer. I say between 1 and 3, it's more like 1 and 5 by this point, to answer along with the required kind of supplementary information to go with it. And the specific requirements around FRIDAS are based on those best practices, but are also dynamic. So allowing for adjustments to reflect planning laws, the latest version of the BNG metric, technical guidance, but also practical feedback. We want FRIDAS to be accessible for the user, so I am more than happy to listen to feedback and explore where FRIDAS may expand or refine. So I'm going to break down the standard. So first of all, we have format. This is in simple terms, making sure that your spatial data is in the format that is actually usable within a GIS system. In planning, errors in data exchange and conversion are a common source of delays and inaccuracies. By ensuring that data is submitted adheres to standardized formats, we can minimize errors during import and analysis, improve data accuracy and precision. and enhance collaboration between basically planning applicants and the local planning authorities themselves. And so our checklist questions are: what is the format of your data? And what is the spatial reference of your data? So next we will move on to the red line boundary. So this defines the legal boundary of the development site and forms the basis for all BNG calculations. I know there are discussions of whether a red line boundary should include a whole site or just the area that is being worked on. That's not a topic I will touch on today, but there are definitely thoughts and issues around just the concept of the red line boundary. But it's recommended that the red line boundaries are drawn within a GIS environment to start with, and fall within land registry boundaries where relevant. And this practice will enhance that positional accuracy by ensuring that spatial features match those records. And the use of a standardized red line across datasets guarantees that field maps are complete and minimizes discrepancies, which help prevent significant errors in habitat assessments that could arise from any misalignments. Furthermore, maintaining the same boundary line before and after development will help monitor post-development changes with higher levels of precision and accuracy as well, so thereby enabling better planning and conservation strategies. And that's pretty much everything I just said, but forgot to scroll. I do apologize. And so our checklist questions are as follows. Is the red line boundary used for all data sets and figures within this plan? Does your red line boundary fall within the relevant land registry boundary? If not, why? And has the red line boundary changed since the initial baseline surveys? And if yes, has this versioning been incorporated into the file name? So next we have identification. So this is referring to the classification and the geometries of the individual habitats and polygon lines. And errors around identification are surprisingly common and can really undermine the accuracy of the BNG assessment. So identification helps keep everything organized with field observations. So habitats should be classified to the UK HAB standard classification and be subject to on-site assessment. And an on-site ecological survey is the best way to ensure that the geospatial representation of those habitats is accurate. Desk-based surveys using aerial satellite imagery can certainly support and supplement. However, it's important to consider that there may be accuracies dependent on images and collection dates, things like that. And then in addition, we recommend that habitat parcels are checked for gaps and overlaps from digitization. And this process is kind of crucial in ensuring those habitats identified in the field as accurately and as classified and drawn as accurately as possible. And an interesting new area that I have been learning about, I think probably about a year ago, I could probably say that I knew absolutely nothing about AI or how to incorporate it into operations or BNG, just generally. However, it's really been clear that this is an emerging tool within ecological data collection and offering new ways to support habitat classification from remotely sensed data. And when used responsibly, AI can improve efficiencies and enable repeat analysis at scale. And I'm not in any way against the use of AI in methodologies and assessments. However, in the context of BNG, AI outputs must be validated against ground truth data, follow the UK HAB classifications, and be reviewed by a qualified ecologist. And when it comes to submissions, there's no obligation to declare if or how AI has been used as part of that assessment or habitat mapping. And AI has really great potential to assist in baseline assessments, but it should always complement, not replace, ecological expertise and field verification. It should also be transparent. So our checklist questions for identification are as follows. Has the OS master map been used to digitize your polygons? Has habitat identification been verified? Are there any gaps between habitat parcels? Do any habitat parcels overlap? And has any processing within the assessment used AI? If yes, please describe and ensure the corresponding metadata accompanies your submission. And I will get to that. So next is data. So this is supplementary and metadata. This can get a little bit overlooked, but it's incredibly important for transparency and traceability. Metadata metadata should include things like spatial reference, lineage, keywords, and a point of contact. It doesn't have to be particularly long or complicated, it's just complete and clear. And again, this allows for standard protocol for data auditing. And we recommend the inclusion of elements from GEMINI 2.3 to ensure comprehensive documentation of the GIS datasets. And the AGI has produced a list of mandatory data elements for improved data quality, which are included as part of our checklist. And we also understand that smaller sites and organizations may not have the capability to complete full metadata. So we have included an essential metadata for smaller sites. And then on the supplementary side, for projects that have not had habitats or conditions surveyed by an ecologist, we're recommending citing data sources that actually support those habitat classifications. In addition, we recommend citing any further data sets relevant to the sign. So this could be local nature reserve, SSSIs, or any information that has come from the local nature recovery strategy. And then providing clear references to that supporting information, the checklist strengthens that lineage of data, ensuring that classifications are based on that robust evidence. And this approach is particularly beneficial when field surveys are impractical or you have a smaller site where it's not obligatory. As for the integration of supplementary data sets, thereby enhancing that completion as well. So our checklist questions for supplementary data are as follows. Have you submitted essential or full metadata? Are there any relevant data sets included as part of your site data? Was your site surveyed by an ecologist? If no, what supplementary data supports the site classification? And then if AI is used, has metadata been included in the GIS submission or accompanying documentation? So this, for the AI submission, this includes things like model name, version, software and platform, data input sources, training set details, validation methodology, and post-processing steps. We've actually created a AI declaration form to help with this. So next we have attributes. So this is our key information stored in our data tables. And these are the fields that describe the habitat parcels, the habitat type, condition, distinctiveness, etc. And the attributes in the data must reflect the GIS standard provided by Natural England. And it is recommended that the biodiversity metric GIS template be used as a foundation for these data sets, but there is also some good Excel files as well that actually break down all of the domains for each of those attributes and include the drop-down options that should be included as part of those domains. So using these kind of these templates and standardized templates ensures that all those necessary fields are captured and logically structured, so facilitating the integration of diverse data sets and improving that attribute accuracy. And one of the really great things about having a great attribute table means that you have so many options for exploring your data. And that's something that we've really seen with the Canal and River Trust, is that if they are looking for across their network, if they're looking for 3 units of canal in the Birmingham Local Planning Authority, they can put the filters on that data to find it. But if we didn't have that attribute data, we wouldn't be able to do that. So it's a really great way of getting insights, also highlighting things like high distinctiveness areas that you may want to avoid as part of design, but also low condition areas that may be a great target for improved condition. So all of these management areas are important, but when it comes to visualization and insights, particularly within GIS, having a great attribute table is everything. So the checklist questions for attributes is which materials from Natural England have been used to develop the GIS data. So is that the GeoPackage template or the GIS data standard? And then finally, we come to our last element, which is slope. So although slope, in my opinion, should be considered as part of a biodiversity plan, as it factors things like water runoff, erosion, and vegetation growth, it's not part of the official metric. So we recommend accounting for slope across all habitat polygons, and this can be done by including trigonometric functions as part of the BNG multiplier. However, a slope is not part of that. It can only really be indicated in supporting documentation. that slope should be a factor in those calculations. The official word from Natural England from a few months ago was to basically ask your local planning authority whether they have a policy around incorporating slope. However, we've seen from experience, at least from the last couple of months, that very few are considering slope, as it hasn't really been thought of. So we are recommending to incorporate slope data, as it just improves your ecological relevance of field data and ensuring that your habitat quality assessments reflect kind of the true conditions of the environment. But kind of the more I dig into slope, the more interesting it gets, the more the ecological side and the geometric side. So if any of you have any thoughts on any of this, I'm interested to hear, but particularly around slope, because that is it's a very interesting topic. So the checklist questions is, what's the approximate range of slope that your data covers? So kind of wrapping up the data management side of this, the introduction of FRIDAS kind of emerges as a tool for addressing some of the challenges I've kind of pointed out and offering a structured approach to improving data quality and ensuring compliance with best practices. And while FRIDAS is pretty comprehensive, we predict more GIS standards will probably need to be considered and added in the future. And this work is dynamic and aims to move with the developing policies from Natural England. So the full standards guidance is on our website, available to download for free. And our next step is to basically include the development of applications that can automate data screening against checklist items. And ultimately, we would like to see a seal of approval for GIS data submitted as part of BNG assessments that tells the local planning authorities that that planning application is supported by verified, robust and reliable data built on critical aspects of data quality. So FRIDAS is kind of the first step in creating that seal of approval. And with this in place, a standardization of that BNG data can support effective environmental planning and conservation efforts. And the overarching goal of actually, I think why we're all here, of achieving meaningful biodiversity gains and helping improve our country and our local areas. So you can find those resources around FRIDAS on our website, including the white paper and the standards, which include best practice and the checklist questions. We offer training around these standards, data auditing and technical guidance. So please feel free to reach out to me to discuss these. So as Sarah mentioned earlier, we have recognized the need for kind of a dedicated space to talk about GIS data in the context of BNG. So this year, I co-founded the BNG Spatial Insights group with Rich Howell and Jonathan Gatwood. We were both, or all three of us, experiencing very similar issues around GIS data in BNG. And so we thought, let's make a space. And so it's open, collaborative forum focused on mapping, data management, spatial analysis, particularly for BNG delivery in England. And it's not just for GIS professionals, it's for ecologists, planners, developers, and anyone basically working with spatial data in the BNG space. And the aim is to build a stronger shared understanding of how geospatial evidence supports better outcomes and to service those practical insights, frustrations and questions that come up when applying BNG in the real world. So we are currently building our committee with hopes of being able to make an impact at the highest levels. I've been talking about this topic for a while, and what I've noticed is now I'm speaking about it more publicly, is that a lot of people are having the same problems, but we're almost siloed. So we're almost having them alone. So the BNG Spatial Insights Group can really bring those voices together. And we currently have over 75 members in our LinkedIn group, which is incredible considering we only set up the group a couple months ago. And so I'm really hoping we can bring these voices together to create real impact. So if you're working on BNG projects, we would love for you to join the conversation, share your ideas, ask questions, and basically shape how we all approach spatial data moving forward. So that's the end of our story map. I'm happy to answer any questions. I didn't want to make this too long, considering this is quite a drier subject for people, and I will hand back over to Sarah.
Brilliant. Thank you, Katie. Really informative. So we do have a few questions. We've got a few people who've given their views about slope. So I'll share those in a minute. But we
Sure.
do have a question from Emily, who's asked whether this would work for small sites as well as your standard larger sites.
So yeah, it would. I think I've not focused too much on smaller sites, and I think that's an area for improvement. Kind of the metadata side, I have having kind of just more of a shorter essentials in terms of metadata, but the principles around format, redline boundary, and attributes, things like that, should all fall within smaller sites. But I do think there's probably some room for some refinement for smaller sites.
Thank you. We've got Alan here. He's asked a question about projection data. Is that what you record? And do you have a standard or choose the best for your area of interest?
So in terms of the projection, we always suggest British National Grid in terms of that projection. And the projection is where it really links with design. I don't know if anybody else has had the experience of receiving design data that doesn't include any spatial reference at all. And so when you go to put it on your map, it just doesn't go anywhere, doesn't sit anywhere. And so having that projection of British National Grid, and that's the reason for having it really, is so that we can link basically design departments with GIS departments. And so we're getting that communication between departments that a lot of the time we may be missing.
Brilliant. And that collaboration is so important, isn't it? And being able to collect
Absolutely.
all the data that
Yeah.
you require. Okay, so we've got James is talking about slope and actually saying, that's a really good point, as it could create a large surface area within the size of a site within a red line boundary. However, if all disciplines are using 2D area, it could cause a bit of a mismatch between ecology and other people. Including slope would increase the size area. So I think you said it could be added separately to the metric calculations. Maybe slope could be added to the metric somehow, possibly 2D calculations versus 3D for existing and post-development. But he also mentions this could become quite complicated.
Yes. You're absolutely right. Yes, it can get very complicated, and I think that the more you kind of delve into it, kind of the more important that the slope data becomes in terms of the geometric and the ecological relevance, but incorporating that is where it does become difficult. And it just ranges there. There are so many different aspects. So we could include, maybe basically a slope aspect as part of those calculations. If you have it within the Excel file, that if you put in your degree of slope, it makes those adjustments. That is a potential option. But also I understand that if you're on a site, you may have ranging slopes. So there's then the questions that come up of, do you take an average? Are you using it just for singular polygons? And then you're going to also have added time in figuring out those slopes as well. So as important as it is to include, and I do believe it is incredibly important, because it does limit your basically what you can do ecologically. And like I said, and James said, the difference in 2D and 3D area, it is something I think is a really great topic for us to have within the Spatial Insights group. And I said, more than interested to hear people's ideas and suggestions on how we do incorporate this and how we could bring this to Natural England with a good idea of implementation, because it's an incredibly important topic.
Yeah, absolutely. And, James also says, about the challenges around pre-development and post-development areas not matching, and
Yep.
finding a way to handle that. Absolutely. Okay, so Let's have
And it
a
might be, sorry, just to jump back in, it
no.
might be that we come to an agreed threshold on slope, um, and that could be based on ecological data of, where does terrain really start to affect the specific habitat you can have within, your post-development site. And that could be the same as linking it. I'm sure there was a question around small sites in there with slope as well,
Yeah, absolutely.
is kind of setting a threshold potentially. This is all just brainstorming and
Brainstorming.
ideas of how we could potentially do this. But like I said, this is just such an important topic.
Great. Um, let's leave slope for a minute because I think we could go down a hole. Um, so Mike is talking about OS master map being isn't that precise. So boundaries, something like ±2 meters for rural areas. Shouldn't a proper topographic survey be used for most developments, as this is what the planning layouts will be using? What's your
Yes,
thoughts on that?
so I would agree that proper topographic survey should be completed. The reality is the most common use and probably kind of a minimum mapping unit is being used is Ordnance Survey master map. So
Mm,
that is kind of the start of the minimum you should kind of be using. And can probably make that a bit clearer. That's a really great point. Um, but yeah, I would agree that you would want to use a full topographic. I can't speak up. I've been speaking for too long. A topographic survey, but where that is not available, Ordnance Survey is being used a lot by a lot of practitioners and a lot of freelance GIS
Yeah,
practitioners in this area. And
yeah,
then you also have some issues that come from that as well, of Ordnance Survey versus land registry, and the accuracies that come in there. So I think with all of these topics, the more you dive into them, the more nuances there are and the more issues that kind of pop up about this versus that and the accuracies and what you use. And I think with the checklist, it's not saying that you have to use OS, but it's identifying. But I think that comment kind of shows that maybe we can open that up as a more open-ended question of what baseline topographic data has been
mm,
used. So thank
yeah.
you for that.
Um, yeah, I think James C is also talking about mapping data. Um, so would be required, and GIS would overlay this with the 2D mapping and could automatically calculate the additional areas to 2D, maybe using, the the
Mm.
topographic mapping data. So yeah, again, I think that kind of moves into that. So Claire's asked, actually, how do we join your spatial insights group? So yeah, would you like
So
to give
yeah,
us some
you
information?
can have a search for us on LinkedIn. Our main kind of output at the moment is the LinkedIn group. So if you search, I think it's BNG Spatial Insights Group, you can request to join. And basically, the parameters of joining are that you are based within the UK, because this is a UK policy, and you're working within the area. So it's pretty loose. So yeah, feel free to join. We're setting up our website at the moment as well, and we're looking for things like articles and communications that people would be potentially interested in putting on the website as well. So we're still in kind of development mode at the moment, but you can find us on LinkedIn.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. We've got a question from Alan asking about which BNG projection um, would you suggest? Maybe he's got,
So I've mentioned British National Grid
yeah,
as the main what I would suggest. Again, that's none of this is kind of required or obligatory at this point, but it's about keeping that consistency, and whether if you're using a different projection based locally, that is fine. And again, I think this is really great feedback, by the way, for kind of refining whether kind of local projections are used. But British National Grid is kind of our go-to on using that.
okay. We've got someone actually asking about joining the group. They've got a colleague, a GIS colleague who works from Spain, but our office and all our project work is UK based. Are you happy for, for them maybe to join the group?
Yeah, yeah, of course. When I say UK based, it's working project work within the UK. It stops, you know, a lot of um, people that are maybe working on policies that aren't relevant to BNG from joining. So if someone is in Spain and they're working on that project, then that's great. If you want to email me their name just so I know, then happy for that.
That's great. So we've got another question about slope actually, and local planning authorities. Are there many, or do you know of many that are actually asking for slope to be included? And if so, have they had any pushback?
As far as I know, I'm not sure if any LPAs are actually asking for it at all.
Okay.
Um, we've just so Jonathan in our BNG SIG is our kind of slope expert, and the word from Natural England was to check with the local planning authority. But from his perspective, he hadn't seen any local planning authorities that are actually asking for it or had thought about asking for it.
Yeah, perfect. Thank you. So I don't know if anyone else has got any other questions they want to pop in quickly into the chat, into the Q&A. I guess really, I mean, I was wondering, you know, if anyone was to take anything away today from things that you've said, to ensure that their data's, you know, accurate and you know, really robust, what would you suggest that they kind of really focus on?
Oh, that's difficult. Ask me to play favorites with my framework. Um, I think for me, what it comes down to is just the absolute basics. As great as would be to incorporate slope, just get your polygons drawn properly. Really call them jollygons. Polygons drawn properly. Make sure that your attribute tables are full and that your red line boundary is consistent. Those are
That's
the main things that I would take away from this. And as basic and as boring an element as it is probably the most fundamental and important.
brilliant. Thank you, Katie. I think Alan's also asked, is aspect of slope also not important? So the other side of the debate here, and how to assess slope as an integration of LiDAR spots, a single figure for an area likely to be imprecise. So
Yeah,
looking for
and
another point of
that's
view.
kind of the others. That's yeah, absolutely, and that's kind of the other side of it of actually getting that calculation in there, and I guess including some kind of confidence level on that figure, which is why I think including a potential threshold in this
Mm,
and a range across polygons. It's not uncomplicated, and there are definitely different sides of how it can be included and how it can be calculated. So I hear that.
yeah, great, thank you. There's a few people asking for access to your slides afterwards. So if you're quite happy to send that across to me, Katie, then I'm
Yeah.
quite happy to pass that on to everybody. Um, so I think we're out of questions. So I think unless anyone else has anything they'd want to quickly add, we'll leave it there today. Katie, thank you very much for
No
joining
worries.
us and sharing all this useful information and, you know, giving us lots more food for thought. Um, and we shall hopefully speak again soon, and
Cool.
hopefully you'll get some new members joining up and carrying on the debate and the good work.
Perfect. Thank you for having me, and thank you for listening, everybody.
Thanks very much, Katie. You take care.
Bye. Thanks.